Good morning, everyone. 3 more days until an overweight bearded stranger in a red suit with a large sack and a cookie addiction slides down your chimney and wanders around your house while you and your family are sleeping. Welcome to The Sweat, everybody, presented by DraftKings. I am Emerson Lotzia. Because of no NHL until after Christmas, we will talk a lot of NBA. We've got some best bets and what to do in the DFS department. Which NFL salaries our analysts are chasing or fading. We'll start, though, on the DK Sportsbook side of this Week 16 slate. Good morning to DraftKings contributors, Pierce Dietrich, Steve Buchanan, and speaking of strange and creepy, Jeff Ulrich. You guys going over or under the following totals? Let's start with the Colts at Arizona on Christmas Day. Ho, ho, ho. 50 points, Steve. What you want to do? 49 now. 49, Steve. 49 now.
Relax, all right? These are two of the top teams hitting the over in the league right now. They've gone a combined 15 and 13. And while that doesn't sound overly impressive, there are only 5 teams in the league that are hitting the over in more than half of their games. So both of these teams play at a higher pace than half of the league. Arizona running 65.6 plays per game. That's tied for the 7th most in the league. The Colts are just above league average as well. I think this game is going over that 49 total.
Jeffrey, 49 total. What do you want to do, bud?
Yeah, well, I want to be, Santa Jeff here and bring you all the points because I agree. I think this one's going over as well. You've got an Indianapolis Colts team that basically just you can pencil in for at least 27 points. They're averaging over 30 points over their last 9 games. I mean, this offense just cannot be stopped. The Arizona Cardinals rush defense certainly isn't going to be the ones to put a cap on Jonathan Taylor because they haven't been able to stop anybody on the ground. And then, I mean, again, you've got an Arizona Cardinals defense that at least has proven that in garbage time, Kyler Murray will rack up the yards. I'm actually a little bit worried that the Colts get up by 10 in this game, and then the Cardinals, as we saw last week, just can't convert in the red zone. But I think at the very least, especially at 49, I think this one's too low. I think you can't keep betting the over until it gets up to around the 51 mark.
Okay, Pierce, what's your approach?
Let's make it 3 overs for the club here. And I agree with everything these guys said, especially the Arizona rush defense struggling to stop some really weak rush attacks. Now they've got to face probably the best running back in years. They're going to struggle with that. That's going to open up the Indianapolis passing game. I have no doubt that Indianapolis is going to put points up against Arizona, who surrendered 26 points to Detroit last week. They're not looking very sharp at the moment. The question comes down to Arizona. Can they fix their problems from last week? And it really wasn't it was a disaster. They lost, but they just didn't execute on 3rd down and 4th down in the first half, and they just fell out of that game. If they can complete those plays, and even if they don't, let's say they do fall behind, this is the time of the season where Kyler Murray needs to be more aggressive. He needs to start running. That's the only way they're going to be able to get through the playoffs, especially if they're not going to have a full-strength DeAndre Hopkins. And this is a team in Indianapolis that will give you short yardage passes and play off the line of scrimmage and allow Kyler Murray to run. So if they get aggressive, then this thing easily will clear the over.
Same total here, Jeff, for Rams at your Vikings and Kirk Cousins. So 49.
I'm bringing a big bag of cold to this one. We're going under on this. I just feel like with the Rams getting back to full health and having Jalen Ramsey out there, it's going to be enough to slow down the Vikings here at home. Again, you've got Kirk Cousins going up against a good team. We saw what he did last week against the Bears, which was really not much. He threw for 2 touchdown passes and basically at a sub 50% completion rate. I also think the Rams on the road here, I know they're the high-flying offense, and I do like Matthew Stafford as a dark horse for MVP, and Cooper Kupp playing, amazing. But I think if they get a lead here, they're just going to sit on it with their running backs, very similar to what they did last week against the Seahawks. So I think this total, while we have 2 good offenses, I think this total is ripe for an under here. 49, it just feels a little bit too high at this point in the season.
How do you feel about this total, Pierce?
I'm going to take the over. The Vikings, 6 of their last 8 games, they've gone over. And in those 6, they've cleared the over by 13 points on average. So this weren't even close. The 2 times they missed, obviously that Bears debacle the other night. And then against the Chargers, it was a 53.5 total, which is pretty high. And they missed mainly because it was just one of those typical Charger games where the offense didn't show up for Los Angeles. Justin Herbert threw for under 200 yards. Austin Eckler under 50 yards rushing. So just one of those typical Chargers games. My issue would be the Rams offense not looking that great the other night. But if you look at it, they were 0 for 4 on 3rd and long, and it just didn't do anything in the first half. But they came back in the second half, scored 17 points, ended up with a 50% third down conversion rate, which is higher than their season average. The Rams offense, I think they're going to be fine. I don't want to overreact to one poor half, and the Vikings tend to go over more, so I'll take the over.
All right, Steve, you're a little concerned about the Rams offense here.
Not really, and these are the two teams that are, one of the two of the 5 teams that have gone over more than 50% of the time. But like we just saw Kirk Cousins play the Bears last week. They had no starting defensive backs in that team, and he still managed to complete only 50% of his pass attempts. Are you kidding? Now he's got to go against the Rams and like Jalen Ramsey and all that, and we're like, oh, Pierce is like, oh, God, I totally got to get the over at this one. Like that was a disaster by the Vikings. Like there's no other way you can put that they literally had 5 defensive backs on the COVID list, and Kirk Cousins was barely averaging 4 yards per pass attempt. That was brutal. Now they're going to face a much better secondary. This game's going under, baby.
All right, sweet. Steve, what about Washington at Dallas here, 47.5?
Yeah, this also feels like it could be a nice under in this one here. Like that Washington offensive line against the Eagles last night, they were just getting tossed all over the place. Now they're facing a good pass rushing team with the Cowboys. Washington only managed 20 points in their last game. That was with Heineke under center too as well. This just feels a little bit too high for me. Cowboys are, haven't been doing anything much offensively either. I have no issue that they're going to get back on track here, but they're not exactly lighting up the scoreboard either. 47.5 points given the under of this one.
Jeff, which direction you going in?
I can't believe this total's this high. Like, I honestly, I do not know. I feel like I'm missing something. Like, did Washington, like, hire a new OC or get, like, a new offensive line like Pierce said? No, this one is a great under. Washington got off to a hot start last week against Philly, who just looked a little bit nervous. And then they basically did nothing the entire game. It's a team that we've mentioned this, like, the last 3 weeks. They're one of the worst in the red zone in the league. And now they're going up against a better defense this week in Dallas. The worry here is Dallas puts up 30 points, but I don't even think you need to worry about that because you're still asking Washington against a really good Dallas defense to score 17 plus points. Both these teams have trended towards the under this year as well. They're both, 6 and 8 hitting overs. So they're obviously got a losing record to the overs. I don't know why you'd want to take on this high a total to go over here. I think this one will come down in the week, and I think this one makes for a really good early week target for your totals to go under on.
Pierce, is this an early week target for a total you want to hammer the under on?
Yeah, we'll keep hammering the under on Washington. They're going to be healthier this week. No doubt that the COVID injuries and the other injuries really hurt that team, especially the offensive line. I believe one of their starters was a full-size plus male model. To give you an idea
nice.
Of some of the people that were playing for Washington last week. They're healthier, but even when they're healthy, like Jeff mentioned, they don't score touchdowns. We just saw this matchup a couple weeks ago, and Washington couldn't score against Dallas, and Dallas couldn't score against Washington. Dallas has a pretty good defense. They've only allowed, 20 points or fewer in 5 of the last 6 games. I think the injuries are finally catching up with Washington. Their defense will still put up a fight. But again, I don't really buy into Dallas yet. They haven't turned it on, so I don't see them turning it on yet this week either. So give me the under.
Pierce, Baltimore at Cincinnati, 44.5 right now is the total in the DK Sportsbook. Baltimore currently on the outside of the playoffs looking in here. This could be their season.
Yeah, I think their season's already over, but I'll take the over. This seems like they just AFC North games every week. They're going to just give them a 43 or 44 for every single game. It doesn't matter who is playing. And I think this one is wrong. Baltimore's defense has struggled all season. They're going to stop the run. That's fine. But the secondary in Baltimore was weak to begin the season. And now they've got the injuries. They like to play man-to-man. They like to press and be aggressive on the line of scrimmage. They just don't have the personnel for that. And when they did have the personnel for that, they still struggled against Cincinnati. They allowed 400 yards passing to Burrow, 41 points. That's a bad spot for Baltimore. Cincinnati's defense, they surprised some people, but they're not as good as we thought they were, or some people thought they were. But they're not also that bad, but they're just an average defense, and I don't think that they're going to completely shut down Baltimore. Baltimore's offense has looked fine all season. Points will happen in this game.
You think points will happen in this game, Jeff?
I do. I'm pretty much on the exact same page. You've got, like Pierce said, just an average Cincinnati defense, and we saw what Baltimore's offense really hasn't been the issue most of the year. Yeah, they can be hit or miss with the passing game, but generally, if the other team is putting up points, they'll be happy to get in shootouts. They did it, early in the year a couple times. They did it against Minnesota. They did it last week against Green Bay, where you saw like this offense can move the ball and score really quickly. And I think on the other side of the ball, this is where you really like the over, because I think Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, I think these guys are going to have a monster day. I mean, I think that since he could put up 35 plus points here, because what Baltimore is putting out in the secondary right now, I mean, Pierce talked about, male plus model sizes or whatever. I don't know who they're dragging in into the secondary in Baltimore right now. This team is going to get shredded. And at 44.5, it's just too low. So, yeah, I definitely like the over in the spot right now.
All right, speaking of male model, Steven, over or under 44.5? Thanks for
Honestly, that was the segue I was really hoping for, and you came through in the clutch. Here's the only worry that I have about the over here. I fear that because Baltimore is in the position that they are, maybe they rush Lamar Jackson back too early, and that's where the offense for the Baltimore Ravens crumbles. Because quite frankly, their offense has looked better with Huntley under center as of late than it has with Lamar Jackson. If we're being honest and we sit back and say, who gives the Ravens the best chance to win right now? It's not Lamar Jackson. And if he's not able to use his legs to run, Jackson kind of becomes a one-dimensional quarterback, and he wasn't exactly, one of the better prospects in the league because of what his passing was, because we can do with his legs. So if they rush back Lamar Jackson, I think this game's going under, because I don't think Baltimore's going to get anything going offensively. So I'm going to side with the under this one. It's going to be gross. It's going to be sweaty, but that's how this NFL season's gone all along.
I honestly don't think we have any Baltimore Raven fans watching the show after what Pierce and I have been saying last month, and then now Steve saying Lamar Jackson isn't even the best quarterback on the team. Sorry, Baltimore Raven fans, we're just spitting truth here. I mean, we're only deal with the hands we get.
Yep, and that's coming from Santa Ulrich there. Pierce was saying that Baltimore's season was over after week one. All right, Steve was mentioning no offense there. That was the case for Tampa Bay and really Carolina last weekend. So those two are going to clash in North Carolina in week 16. 44 points is the total on the DK Sportsbook. Jeff, which way are you leaning?
I think this one's too low, too. I'm going to lean over here. I mean, it feels like I've taken one overs too many, just in the way the league is trending. But it does feel like we have a bit of an overreaction this week to, the COVID situations and just a lot of unders hitting. Look, I get it. Tampa Bay lost all their star players. But one reason why Tampa Bay is so good is because they have some of the most insane depth in the league. Antonio Brown is back next week, so that takes care of Chris Godwin. Ronald Jones. Ronald Jones started over Leonard Fournette last year. It's just Leonard Fournette had a good playoffs, and he took over the starting role. Ronald Jones is a very good running back. I don't really know if the Bucs offense is going to miss a beat here. And the biggest thing is they're taking on the Panthers, who can't stop anyone in third and long situations. I think the Panthers will move the ball a little bit with Cam Newton rushing the ball. Tampa does allow, quite a few rushing yards on the ground to opposing quarterbacks. So I think you can pencil Carolina in for 14, 17 points here. And I think Tampa will take care of the rest. I think you're getting a very low overreaction total to all these injuries. Never see 44 totals with Tampa Bay. I take the over here.
All right, Steve, you're going to be without Godwin the rest of the year. Fournette is likely out. How much does that hurt Tampa Bay's chances of putting up a boatload of points?
I mean, it hurts, too, because everyone's like, oh, it's Tom Brady. He'll get the offense down. Does anybody forget when he was with the Patriots for his last year and he had no offense? That wasn't Tom Brady, right? He wasn't looking like the Tom Brady we're all used to. I mean, look, this total has come down really low, though. This opened up at 48.5, and then all the injuries are oh, look at that. Good job, guys. It opened at 48.5. It's just tumbled since with all the news coming through. I mean, it was at 47.5 just 2 days ago, and it's come all the way down to 44. This is too low now. I mean, I don't really think anything's going to come of Cam Newton. They're certainly not going to run anything on the ground, so you got to rely upon him. But if the Bucs can start putting up at least 25 points or so, 26, 27 points in this, the Carolina Panthers should be able to do the rest. They're going to have to do it through the air, which is scary to think about. But, yeah, this is just too low now. 44 points. I'll take the over.
Pierce, does this total feel too low to you?
Yeah, let's go with the over. It's Keyshawn Vaughn season. He's finally going to get his opportunity. Been waiting for 2 years for this to happen. Third-round pick. He's got talent. But as Jeff mentioned, Jones was the starting running back all last season, and he's still a good running back on a good line. Gio Bernard could start getting some work. They've got enough weapons. Yeah, they laid an egg last week, but that's because they had to come up with a game plan in the middle of the game. They've got all week. Bruce Arians is a good coach. Tom Brady is still a smart guy. They'll come up with a plan, and they're going to be working with short fields. Carolina turnovers, three and outs, punts. I think Tom Brady's going to have plenty of volume and opportunities to score points and then give some garbage points to Carolina. This thing goes over.
Steve, we got someone on Twitter, too, saying you are so hot. You really are a model. So I need all of you to hang out. Nobody wants you to go away, Steve. We're going to poke over to the DFS side of Week 16 with you three coming up. But first, we're going to help you build those NBA lineups right after this break.
Appreciate it, Mom.
Back on your screen, it is the Sweat presented by DraftKings. We are bringing that big Nick energy to the table, the adventures of Nick and Nick, as Cody behind the scenes likes to say. DraftKings contributor Nick Fryer and RotoWire's Nick Whalen, ready to help you guys and gals build some NBA lineups. I do miss the adventures of Pete and Pete on Nickelodeon. TV is just not the same as what it used to be. Okay, who are you going to build around at center on this 6-game slate, Mr. Whalen?
Well, we have no Giannis. We got no Jared Allen. We got no Pascal Siakam, who's center eligible. We got no Al Horford, no Capella, no Mo Bamba.
Well,
So Nikola Jokic.
Nick, hold on one second, because we do have Joe Johnson now back with the Celtics, the team that drafted him 20 years ago. So let's not sleep on him. He will play tonight, it looks like, according to Adrian Wojnarowski.
That's what I'm seeing. The question is he going to be center eligible? Maybe with what's going on in Boston, who knows? We're going to have to get him added to the DK player pool as soon as possible. I did notice, by the way, that Lance Stevenson is not in the pool right now. So get the tech crew on that as soon as possible. But at the center position specifically, you have Jokic, who you're going to have to pay up for, as you would any night. But I think you could save a little bit of money and go Nick Vucevic at 10,100. He's an interesting play to me against a Toronto team that's as decimated as any right now. And he has 45 and 37 DraftKings points over his last 2 games. Bulls themselves still without several regulars, including Zach LaVine tonight. Chris Boucher, basically the only healthy big man for Toronto. And obviously not a lot of people, I should say, love Chris Boucher. I think defensively that's a pretty major mismatch. So I like Vucevic to go off tonight. And then John Collins at 7,300 going up against Orlando, another team dealing with a ton of absences. Again, no Clint Capella, no Trae Young for Atlanta. That to me makes John Collins kind of the obvious number one option for that team. And I think he's going to play a ton of minutes at both power forward and center tonight.
I mean, Fryer, honestly, the Celtics should just bring back like Kevin Garnett. Sign him to a 10-day contract or something, please.
I mean, people would pay to see that, too.
Yep.
I mean, he is a big ticket after all, not to play too much on that. But Nick kind of hit on both the guys that I was looking at tonight. Vucevic was the first one that kind of caught my eye, as much as Jokic is a guy who you're going to pay attention to, both of Nicola's. But John Collins is the guy I ended up landing on tonight at 7.3K, going up against a Magic team that has not done well against opposing centers this season. And they obviously are depleted, too, in terms of numbers, although got to keep tabs on Wendell Carter Jr. tonight and, of course, Cole Anthony at the guard position. But with no Trae Young and Clint Capella, Nick kind of hinted at this a little bit, Collins gets the second largest usage bump on the team when those guys are off the floor. And he already had a pretty significantly high usage bump as it was with them on the floor. So to me, the offense is going to run through him for the most part tonight. And the Magic are also just all around one of the least efficient teams on the defensive end in the league this season. So I think this is a big spot for Collins.
Okay, so now the question is, Fryer, who's a forward worth building your lineup around? One who's likely going to play.
Yeah, we're going to go back to the Raptors Bulls game, and I'm going to go with DeMar DeRozan. Of course, no Siakam. We talked about that already. And that makes the defensive matchup a little bit more favorable for DeRozan. And with DeRozan, too, I know he gets a ton of usage when LaVine is still on the floor. LaVine is doubtful tonight, so we're expecting him to not be out there. But even with LaVine off the floor, DeRozan gets one of the largest usage bumps on the Bulls roster. It goes all the way up to 36.4%. That's a 5.8% point bump for him. That's huge. And then the Raptors in general, a middling team in terms of defensive efficiency, but you take out Fred VanVleet at the guard position and then Pascal Siakam. And I like the Bulls to have their way in this one, and DeRozan's going to be the guy to lead that charge.
All right, Waylon, who's your building block at forward?
Yeah, I like the DeRozan call. I mean, you could go Jason Tatum, you could go Paul George. So you have a decent amount of healthy options here. I'm a little concerned about the matchup, but I do kind of like the situation that OG Anunoby is in on the other side of that Toronto-Chicago matchup. He's at 7,900. I know this Raptors team may be a little bit overmatched tonight, but he's really like their only good player available. They have a bunch of replacement guys who they were like rushing into Chicago yesterday. Could be kind of a disastrous situation, but he's going to be their number one option with no Fred VanVleet. He saw 28 minutes in his return from that long-term hip injury against Golden State over the weekend, but that was 4 days ago. So, we know Nick Nurse is a coach who's not afraid to, throw a ton of minutes at his best players. And obviously they're in a situation where, as long as Anunoby is cleared for that, which I think he should be, we could see him play 38, 39, 40 minutes in this game as long as it's relatively close. So I think the Raptors probably get killed tonight, but Anunoby is their clear number one option. I would also steer people toward Chris Middleton at 8,300, kind of in a similar situation with Milwaukee missing a few key guys, including Giannis. And then Franz Wagner at 7,600. The Magic currently have 13 players injured or in COVID protocols, according to the good folks at rotowire.com. Luckily, Franz Wagner is not one of them. He's basically a lock for at least 30 to 35 DraftKings points a night at this point. And if Cole Anthony and or Wendell Carter don't end up playing in this game, I think he could be in for another huge night. You look at his last 13 games, 17.5 points, 5.9 rebounds, 4.2 assists, 1.1 steals, and 1.1 threes per game.
Waylon, take me to guard. Who has building block potential at guard?
Okay, so other than Lance Stevenson and Joe Johnson, I'm going to look at two guys who I think will probably end up being relatively popular tonight. The first is Drew Holiday. You're going to have to pay up for him. His price is way up compared to where it has been the last couple of weeks. He's at 9,400, but he gets a really good matchup against the Houston Rockets, who are both banged up and terrible either way. He's coming off of two huge games. Last week was rested in the Bucks' most recent game, so he should be fresh for this one. And the other guy I like a little bit cheaper is Tyrese Haliburton. He's at 8,200, really taking advantage of De'Aaron Fox being out for these last couple of games. That'll, of course, be the case again tonight. I think his salary could actually be quite a bit higher based on the fact that he's put up 42, 47, 54, and 52 DraftKings points over his last 4 games. He's got 3 straight double-doubles, has neared a triple-double in a couple of those games. He's really taken off with Fox out.
All right, Fryer, what do you got?
Yeah, it's Tyrese Haliburton is probably my favorite play tonight. I like the value guy I have set aside as well, but Tyrese Haliburton probably is my favorite high-priced guy. I know the Kings are second in pace, and the Clippers are up there in pace too, but they are a very efficient defensive team. However, Nick was talking about some of those games that Haliburton just went off. He just put up 51.5 DK fantasy points up against the Golden State Warriors, which last I checked, they are the most efficient team on the defensive end this season. So he's doing fine without De'Aaron Fox. I know his usage rate doesn't get a huge bump. He's only up to 19% right now. Just with when you look at Fox, not factoring all the other guys too, because I really don't care about De'Aaron Fox so much when I'm talking about that. But still, we see what he's doing from a fantasy perspective. He's done it against teams that are good defensively. What more do you need to hear?
Fryer, I have a question for you, and that question is going to be, can you build around someone in the value department on this slate? Someone who can save us some cash, but also deliver us the goods.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of value to be had right now as we're dealing with all the COVID protocols and then other people dealing with injuries as well. Cedi Osman is the guy that jumps out to me right away. You have no Jared Allen. You have no Evan Mobley. The last time that Cleveland saw Boston, there was no Jared Allen in that game either, and Evan Mobley stunk in that game. He went like 0 for 11 from the floor, and Cedi Osman went off the bench, and he just went for 23 points and 39.5 DK fantasy points against a depleted Milwaukee team, admittedly, but he gets the second largest usage bump with no Jared Allen, no Evan Mobley, and of course got to factor in Colin Sexton in that too to make sure the percentages are right, bringing his usage rate up to 25.1%. So Cedi Osman at 4.5K against the Celtics tonight is my guy for value.
Waylon, a value building block.
Yeah, I like actually Lauri Markkanen and Kevin Love, who are at 6,000 and 5,700 from that Cavs game. Obviously, no Okoro, no Mobley, no Allen. Ed Davis being out actually like low-key kind of a big deal for this team. So I think both of those guys could see a ton of minutes tonight. I mean, if you want to go down the DeMarcus Cousins path at 4,400 tonight against Houston, he should be in for another high minute night by his standards with all the Bucks guys sidelined. I was prepared to go on this big soliloquy about Onyeka Okongwu, who is my favorite value tonight. He's at 3,400. I thought he was going to be in a great spot with no Clint Capella. There's still a chance he could return value, but the Hawks have said he's going to remain on a minutes limit. This will only be his second game of the season. He was recovering from off-season surgery, so maybe not as much upside as I had thought, but I still like Okongwu. At 3,400, if you just need a low-cost piece to fill out your lineup, I don't mind tossing him in there. You could even pivot to Gorgie Jang at 3,100. Not a ton of upside with either of those, but I think there's enough that they could at least meet value.
All right, guys, good stuff there. Thank you for helping us out with the DFS side of tonight's 6-game NBA slate. We got some best bets to discuss around the association right after we chase for fades on Week 16 salaries around the NFL. I have some wonderful news, everybody. DraftKings contributors Pierce Dietrich, male model Steve Buchanan, and Jeff Ulrich are back for some Chase or Fade to see if they agree or disagree with these statements about Week 16 in the NFL. More of a DFS look at this slate. So we're looking right now at the $3 million Fantasy Football Millionaire Contest for the Sunday slate. It's incredible. We give you a chance to become a millionaire every week for like 15 or 20 bucks. At quarterback, Tom Brady had under 7 fantasy points. That's a season low against the Saints in that high-powered offense. But he still has a salary more than $7,000 this week. So chase or fade that you should pay up for TB12 against Carolina and bank on a bounce-back week, Jeff.
I mean, I'm kind of conflicted on this one. I do think he's going to have a bounce-back week. I do also think that you should probably fade Tom Brady at this price, and it's just because there's cheaper options with very, very similar upside. Jalen Hurts at 6,400 going up against the New York Giants. Joe Burrow at 5,900 going up against the Baltimore Ravens team we've rallied on already too much in this show. I think Brady is due for a bounce back, and simply for the fact that Antonio Brown is going to be out there. He's still got decent running backs, and Rob Gronkowski is certainly going to be able to take advantage of a Carolina defense that just doesn't stop anybody these days. So I don't mind the idea of like a contrarian Tampa Bay stack, but I do think there's more cost-effective strategies at quarterback. And like I said, Hurts and Burrow is where I would start looking.
Okay, Pierce, where are you going to look? I mean, you're going to pay up for TB12, and if not, you got someone else?
Yeah, I'll chase this. I think a lot of people aren't going to want to go there without the weapons and at the high price. But Carolina's defense, I mean, they're okay, but they've been put in poor positions all season. And you got a really cheap stack here. Yeah, you got to pay up for Brady. You'll get low ownership. And you're going to have to pay up for Gronk. You're going to get low ownership. But then you can pair in a really cheap wide receiver. You can take one of these cheap running backs. Someone is going to run the ball in the goal line if we're predicting that Tampa is going to score points. So I think you're going to get a really low stack that has the upside. Is it risky? Yeah, I mean, Steve made a good point that Tom Brady without weapons didn't play very well with New England. But you're going to get angry Tom Brady narrative. I think he bounces back in this game.
Steve, bounce back week here from your ex.
I mean, you look at this as a bounce back spot. I mean, I think it's pretty simple to bounce back from a 6 DraftKings fantasy point performance. Is 10 a bounce back? If
12 would be. It would be 12. You have a double.
I mean, but to be honest, though, Pierce brought up a good point. Like, when you usually pair somebody with Tom Brady, you're getting somebody who's like 7K as a wide receiver. You pair Brady and Antonio Brown, you're like just under 13K total for these guys. Like, that's a pretty cheap stack. With that being said, I think Brady is like a tournament only play for me just because of how high the salary is. He's not doesn't have his usual complement of weapons, so I'm not going for him mostly. I think Jeff said it perfectly. A lot of good guys to pay down for this week, so I think Brady's a good tournament play, but I'm not going out of my way to play him.
Okay, let's go to America's team. Let's go now free from the clueless and shady Urban Meyer. James Robinson put up nearly 18 fantasy points last week, his best output since week 10. So America's team now visits the Jets. This is the Jaguars. So chase or fade, you should continue to ride the James Robinson redemption train, Pierce.
I will chase the James Robinson matchup train. I'm going to fade this redemption train. Urban Meyer wasn't the problem. I'm sorry. Did you watch that game last week? They lost decisively to the Texans. He wasn't the problem. But James Robinson, at this price, in this matchup, he should be fine. 4.7 yards per carry. He's catching the ball out of the backfield. And as we expected, we saw his snap rate go up to 81%. So, there was a little bit of an Urban Meyer effect there. But what's really driving the choice is the price and the matchup.
Okay, so he's $5,900 here, Steve. Jets ranked dead last in fantasy points allowed to running backs.
Yeah, they're absolutely horrible, right? But, Robinson was like the uber chalk last week, and you easily could have faded him, and it wouldn't have been a big deal. 17.8 DraftKings fantasy points at 5,400. Sure, it was a nice output for him at the salary that he was at, but it's not like this was this smash game that he had. And then they're playing from behind against the Texans. He draws 6 targets. Like, who eats the targets on this team? There's nobody to throw to. And Robinson could only manage 6 targets last week, caught 3 of them for a whopping 13 yards. Great, thanks. If he didn't make the end zone, he would have been one of the biggest chalk busts of the season. So if you want to take somebody in this game, go with Laquan Treadwell, who's through 3,500. He's getting nearly double-digit targets in 3 weeks now. Like, that's been the target for Trevor Lawrence as of late. People are going to go back to Robinson. Matchup is great, but let's be honest here. That wasn't a big performance like we all thought he was going to have. So I have no problem fading Robinson in this game.
Jeff, to you.
I mean, it's kind of a similar situation here. Like, I think Steve is right. Like, Robinson is probably going to he's probably locked in for like 14 to 20 points just because it's the Jets. The Jets allowed Duke Johnson to go for over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns last week. But it's really hard to put into words how bad the Jacksonville offense is. And really, like, how bad kind of James Robinson has looked just as a player over the last few weeks, too. I know he's a solid running back, but sometimes, these fantasy football circles, give James Robinson the ball, he's awesome. He's really not that good.
Whoa.
And I think I think it boils down to the fact there's a lot of pivot plays this week. You can go down to Miles Sanders, you can go up to Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs is there. I just feel like upside-wise, I don't know if this spot is quite as good as people think, just because it's the Jags offense. Is he a cash game must? Yes, play James Robinson if you're playing cash games. I don't know who plays cash games these days, but some people probably do. Robinson is a good value, but I don't think he's necessarily like a must play for big field GPPs.
Our king, J-Rob, is about to have himself a holiday feast. Also, pray for Kenny Ducey. Chargers wide receiver Keenan Allen has not scored fewer than 15.5 fantasy points. That dates back to week 6. He's $7,700 this week at the 3-11 Texans. So chaser fade Allen as a receiver you should pay up for, Steve.
Yeah, look, I mean, this is the most expensive we've seen him all season long. And, it's really because he scored 3 touchdowns over the last 2 games. But, I mean, you take away some of those games, like, he's not exactly bringing back value on how expensive he's gotten now. He needs to score at this point to bring back that value at a season high 7,700. Like, it's such a crap answer, but it's like, if I'm going to consider Keenan Allen at 77, then I'm just trying to do whatever I can to get Cooper Kupp in, who's consistently going over 100 yards in every single game. Now he faces the Vikings, like such a poor secondary. Like, come on. I mean, what are we going to see here again? Like another 100 yards? Like, yes, that's most likely what's going to happen here. He's seen double-digit targets in 6 straight games now. So, Keenan Allen is a fine option, but at his season-high salary, I can't say I'm going out of my way to take him this week.
All right, Jeff, more than 19 fantasy points scored in 3 of the last 4 games.
Yeah, I'll chase this one. I mean, I think this is a week where you're going to find a lot of value, like even at the quarterback position. And we already went over some running backs that you can throw in there. And I think wide receiver, you need to pay up and probably for multiple positions. Yeah, I mean, look, it comes down to Cooper Kupp or Keenan Allen, like, please try and get up to Cooper Kupp. But Keenan Allen, I mean, like, when's the last time he didn't get you 10 fantasy points? I don't think it actually has happened this year. The Chargers are just very good at getting in front and then letting the other team come back. And they're like, oh, we got to pass the ball again. So Keenan Allen always ends up with 10 targets. He may not have the slate-breaking type of games that Cooper Kupp does, but he's also not going to, completely bust. And you look at the wide receiver position. I mean, I tried to make Deontay Johnson happen last week, but like that with Ben Roethlisberger, you can't trust him. Jamar Chase has gone cold. He could bounce back this week, but who else can you trust? DK Metcalf? No. I mean, there's nobody else. So I think you pay up for Keenan Allen. I think you probably also pay up for Cooper Kupp this week.
Pierce, do you pay up for him? Keenan Allen.
No, I'm going to fade. If you're one of the 5 people Jeff mentioned playing cash games, then he's probably not a bad play. But GPPs, you're going to want to get up to Kupp if you can. It's pretty tough. I would even consider going to Tyreek Hill before I went to Keenan Allen. Where I would go is go down to Jamar Chase in GPPs. We know what he can give you upside-wise in a decent match or a really good matchup against Baltimore. We saw him get 2 touchdowns in that previous game. And then just speaking of Cincinnati, there's a lot of value there as well with your receivers. I mean, Steve called Tyler Boyd last week. He found the end zone. You look at the last time Baltimore faced Cincinnati. T. Higgins had a big game. I'm much more likely to roster Cincinnati receivers than I am Keenan Allen.
All right, looking a little further down the board here, more than $2,000 less than Keenan Allen. We have Lions wide receiver Amon-Ra St. Brown checking in at $5,600. Over the last 3 weeks here, gentlemen, he's averaged more than 21 fantasy points a game. So the Lions are in Atlanta this week, but Jared Goff and COVID protocols. Chase or fade that even with the Lions' uncertain quarterback situation, St. Brown's hot streak is worth riding into week 16, Jeff?
This really comes down to the quarterback play for me.
Okay.
If Tim Boyle is going to be starting, and I can't remember if it was Pierce or Steve, but like we're definitely in agreement on this show that Tim Boyle is someone you need to just fade 100% completely across the board. David Blau, Mr. Blau, as I like to refer to, actually isn't bad. I would chase him on St. Brown if it was David Blau. We've seen him put up some numbers. And really, like, the matchup is great. I mean, if it was Goff starting, I'd absolutely love him on Ross St. Brown because Atlanta is terrible defending against the wide receiver position. They're just a bad team in general. They're not going to put a ton of pressure. They're not going to have a huge ball control, for the whole game or something. And Amon-Ra St. Brown, like you said, now getting double-digit targets. But you've got to wait and see on this one. If Tim Boyle gets announced as starter, run. Just run the other way. Bet the Falcons. Do whatever.
Hey, Pierce, you agree? Or regardless of who starts at quarterback, he's a rock-solid play.
No, I'm not with Chase, but we have to put the caveat that Goff has to play. I am the Detroit apologist, so of course I'm going to play the Detroit player one more week. But you look at what Amon-Ra St. Brown does. He plays in the slot the entire game. That means he's not going to be guarded by A.J. Terrell, who has almost a 90 PFF grade. Atlanta, 30th in pass DVOA, 30th in pass DVOA against slot receivers. So as long as Goff is playing, I know his prices come up, but this is still one more week where you can go to St. Brown if Goff's playing.
Okay, Steve, Falcons ranked 29th against wideouts in fantasy this season.
Yeah, look, I mean, these guys have nailed it. I really don't have much to add other than, I ran to the board when I saw Detroit was plus 4.5 underdogs, and then Jared Goff got COVID, and now I'm probably going to be the idiot holding the bag with Detroit plus 4.5 with Tim Boyle under center. But yeah, if Goff is playing, then St. Brown is going to be one of the first guys I lock into my lineup. If it's anybody else, you'll just be seeing me crying on Twitter that I have Detroit plus 4.5.
All right, man. I love you on Twitter. You're great. You're a fantastic follow. Let's go to tight end. This is the department that Jeff and Pierce obviously shine in, despite failing to catch a potential game-winning 2-point conversion in, well, let's see, last couple weeks, right? 2 out of the last 3 weeks. Mark Andrews has 24 targets, has a total of 70 fantasy points in the past 2 weeks. So this week, he's $7,000 against Cincinnati. We know what a big divisional battle this is. If you look back, though, at their first matchup in Week 7, Andrews with just 3 grabs for 48 yards. That's under 8 fantasy points. So chase or fade that. Despite a great last couple of weeks, you should fade Andrews against the Bengals, Pierce.
Fade Mark Andrews against the 26th ranked against tight end defense in the Bengals, 25th most fantasy points allowed, which sounds crazy to do the fade, especially if Huntley plays. But it looks like Lamar is going to play. And even if Huntley plays, I'm still going to stay firmly on team tight end punt. You've got plenty of options. Zach Gentry is going to fill in for Pat Fryermuth this week. CJ Uzomah is going to go against a Baltimore team that struggles against tight ends. James O'Shaughnessy led Jacksonville in receiving last week. And then last on my list, Cole Kmet. He got an early week price. He exploded in his game. He gets a really good matchup against the Seattle team that struggles against tight end. Andrews, good spot, but this is a punt tight end week.
Steve, no matter whether it's Lamar Jackson or Huntley under center, like he's going to be a featured target.
Yeah, no doubt. But the only thing is, like, I just can't get over the fact of like paying over 7K or at 7K for a tight end. Like, you have Rob Gronkowski, who's probably going to be a target monster this week. He's $800 cheaper going up against the Carolina Panthers, who are another team that struggles against that position. But then you have someone like, Dallas Goedert, who just went crazy last night, 5,100 against the Giants. That wasn't adjusted because they hadn't played. Even someone like, Gerald Everett. I keep bringing this name up, but like, he just keeps getting targets. I don't know why he keeps getting targets, but Seattle wants to throw to him. If they want to throw to him, I'll take him at 3,700. His price point has just not moved for weeks now, despite the target share on the rise. So Andrews is an attractive option. If you're paying down to some of these other positions, it's easy to get, Andrews in. But if I'm paying up, it's not going to be someone like Andrews. It's going to be someone like for Cooper Kupp or for one of these more expensive wide receivers.
Yeah, Jeff, I know you don't like paying up for tight ends. You got Kittle playing on Thursday. Kelsey's status is in doubt for Sunday. So this man is the top choice on paper. You brave enough to do it?
I mean, look, Pierce said this is a punt. Every week is a punt week when we're talking tight end for me. But look, you're basically asking for the game to work out exactly how it did last week for Baltimore. I think there is a good chance that, like, since he gets a lead and then you see Mark Andrews get 12 targets again. But the price is up now. And, like, realistically, I mean, how many times can that game fly? There's also a lot of different scenarios where Tyler Huntley regresses, Lamar Jackson plays, and he's so bad that he can't even get Mark Andrews the ball. I think there's a couple players I like better than Mark Andrews. Dallas Goedert, we've already mentioned. New York Giants are not good against the tight end position either. Dallas Goedert finally starting to look like Mark Andrews, basically, averaging like 18 yards per catch over his last few games. We've always talked about this guy has the athleticism, and it's finally starting to show through. I think Philly puts the beat down on the Giants this week. And then Pierce mentioned Cole Kmet. This is a great matchup against Seattle. They're second worst in terms of yards per pass attempt against over the last 3 games. I think that Cole Kmet's in his place where he could get 10-plus targets, potentially even push for like 100 yards. I think Cole Kmet is a breakout player eventually, and this is the spot that it'll happen if it does happen this year.
Gentlemen, that was fantastic. This will be the last show I'm with you before Santa arrives and after the New Year. So you three have filled me with holiday cheer, and thank you so much for everything you've done for us here over the past year. Okay?
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, not a problem. Pierce, anything?
Merry Christmas.
Thank you very much. All right, NBA Best Bets is next. That was our final break of the show. This is our final block of the show, and we have an NBA panel here consisting of DraftKings contributors Nick Fryer and Matt Meiselman, going to talk about some NBA best bets, so your favorite bets on the DK Sportsbook for tonight's 6-game slate. Actually, it's a 5-game slate now, right? That's right. It is 5 games because moments ago it was reported that the Bulls-Raptors game has been postponed. Anywho, with that said, which favorite are you expecting to cover tonight, Matty?
So this is a slate where I actually like more favorites than underdogs. That's kind of rare for me. I tend to think underdogs are the way to find some value, but I think there are some really shorthanded teams. And then specifically, there's a team that usually is really good that is missing I think it's two best players. So, so the Cavaliers are missing Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, and we've actually seen the total for this Cavs Celtics game jump from 211.5 to 216.5. But the spread hasn't budged much, and I think the Celtics have lost some games recently. The Cavs have been on this winning streak, but I'm pretty sure this is the first time this year they've played without both of their big men. And I think their defense kind of just falls apart here without those guys. So I think the total going up has made a lot of sense, but the spread should be going with it. I think the Celtics deserve to be 8 or 9 point favorites. I know I always pick the Celtics. It has had mixed results, but -6 or so, like I think this line should be higher.
Interesting, Matt. Total increases right around the time they signed Joe Johnson to a 10-day contract. Fryer, which favorite do you expect to cover tonight?
Emerson, you took my point. I was going to talk all about Joe Johnson. I had all these stats and everything. I was going to go on this long soliloquy and everything. I'm really disappointed. But yes, okay. I am going to take the Celtics. I was looking at I would have normally taken the Cavs in this situation because they are a cover machine. As much as the Celtics are at least over 500 against the spread this season, 15, 14, and then 2 pushes. But when you look at the Cavs, Matt was talking about it. Evan Mobley, no Jared Allen. Both of them are out. When they saw each other last time this season, the Cavs and the Celtics, Jared Allen was out that game, and Evan Mobley may as well have been out of that game. He went like 0 of 11 from the floor, and the Celtics won that game by 6 points. The spread right now, 5.5. And when you look at Cleveland too, they are 10-2 against the spread as road dogs this season. Of course, normally I would trust them in this situation, but at some point you would expect some semblance of regression. This is a prime spot for it, and the Celtics are 9-6 against the spread after a loss, which is a situation they find themselves in tonight.
Matt, I know you mentioned that you like more favorites on tonight's slate than underdogs, but is there an underdog you can see covering?
Yeah, there is one single underdog that I'm especially excited about, and that's the Sacramento Kings at home against Los Angeles Clippers. So the low-key injury for the Clippers is that Isaiah Hartenstein, I think it's an ankle injury, is out of the lineup. And normally you would think, like, this is a guy who doesn't really matter. He's their backup center. He plays 20 minutes a game. But I think he's the most important defensive player on the team. And with him out, they have to give minutes now to Serge Ibaka, who is a much worse defender. So that makes a little bit of a difference. And then I think we should get Rashawn Holmes back, which is really the key to this game. Sacramento has had major problems with interior defense. Tristan Thompson is playing center, but they don't really have a backup center. They function much better when you put Thompson on the bench. You have Holmes starting. So this is a little bit dependent on Holmes being back. We don't know that for sure yet. He's been dealing with, I think it's an eye injury, but if Holmes is back there, the Kings at +5.5, +6, whatever that number ends up being, I think that's a really good spot.
Which dog you feeling tonight, Fryer?
So I like the Magic tonight, but I want to talk a little bit more about the Rockets versus Bucks game instead. There's been a little movement on that. It was at 10.5 when I saw it earlier in the day. It's at 10 now. So make sure you try and get that while it's as high as possible. So I know with the Bucks, they lost to the Cavs recently, but they were depleted. They were without Chris Middleton in that game. Drew Holiday got arrested because that poor dude has been overworked. But when you look back a game further, they lost in overtime to the Pelicans, and that should never happen with the Bucks. So now I know Middleton is back, but Christian Wood is expected to be in the lineup tonight. He's questionable. At least it's. For me, in the NBA, if it's not, not talking about health and safety protocols, questionable is just as good as probable most of the time. And then the last time these two teams saw each other, the Rockets only lost by 9 points, which would cover. And then in that game, Giannis was playing. So a pretty advantageous situation for the Rockets to at least cover. I don't expect them to pull off an upset. And the Bucks are 4-8 against the spread as home favorites this season. And the Rockets are 8-7-1 as road dogs against the spread this season. So I like Houston in this one.
Fryer, which underdog money line bet is worth chasing tonight? Again, just a 5-game slate now.
Yes. So the reason I didn't want to talk about the Magic Hawks game is because I want to talk about it here. They were 8-point dogs when I checked out earlier. That has moved down a little bit to 7.5. Obviously, a ton of value for that one. And the biggest thing is no Trae Young, no Clint Capella tonight. I was stunned to see this. This is the first game that they haven't had either one of those players in the lineup this season. I would have thought Clint Capella would have missed at least a couple games so far. Got to keep tabs on Cole Anthony and Wendell Carter Jr.'s status. I know no Bamba tonight. Those two guys are questionable. I still feel like that means that they're going to play. But regardless, a lot of value to be had in this one. And neither team is really good when it comes to covering the spread, but Atlanta's without 2 of its top 3 players. And I mean, like, it's Trae Young too, like one of the best players in the league. So I think if there's going to be an upset tonight, it's going to be Magic versus Hawks.
Money line bet for an underdog you think is worth chasing, Matt?
So I was just going to go with the Kings again because I like them for the spread. I think there's a decent chance they win. But we did actually just get some news for this Hawks game, so maybe I'll stick with the same pick. Lou Williams, health and safety protocols. Timothy Luwawu-Cabarrot, health and safety protocols. So if we get Cole Anthony and Wendell Carter Jr. back, then I'm totally on board with where Nick is looking with the Magic to win as underdogs. And then maybe the Rockets if Chris Middleton doesn't play. A lot of what I'm saying here is just contingent on updates, right? Like there's just so much that could happen. So I like the Magic if they get their guys in. I like the Rockets if Middleton doesn't play. I like the Kings just in general. So maybe I'll just stick with the Kings again because that's the one clear spot I think where we have an undervalued underdog.
Fryer, which game total makes the most sense to bet?
Yeah, and as we're all waiting on this stuff, make sure you guys get the DK Live app if you haven't already, and follow DK Live on Twitter if you aren't already doing that, because that's where you're going to get all the updates very timely. So Nuggets, Thunder, the total on that one, I like the over. It's at 214, and there has not been any movement on that as every other thing seems to be moving as we're talking right now. The over has hit 17 times in Denver's 29 games this season. The over hasn't hit much for the Thunder. Obviously, we've seen some pretty brutal games out of them offensively. 11 out of 29 games hitting the over. But the over has hit more often when OKC is on the road than at home. I'm sorry, at home than on the road. And then Denver has hit the over 11 of 16 times in road games this season. So I think that pace up for the Thunder tonight and go with the Nuggets and them hitting the over.
Maddie, which total do you like?
So I'm going right back to this Hawks Magic game. This is really where I wanted to talk about this, and it's the under, especially if Cole Anthony doesn't play. So he's really the only playmaking guard that Orlando has right now with all the various guys that are out for health and safety protocols. And then taking Lou Williams out is actually a really big deal. So ordinarily, the most important player on the Hawks for totals is Trae Young, where he just speeds up the game so much. He plays no defense. He plays incredibly good offense. So we already have a very low total for this game at 212 because he's not there. Normally it would probably be in the 220s. Lou Williams is kind of like a mini Trae Young in that sense, where he's a decent offensive player, not really great, but he's fine, and a very bad defender who does play kind of fast. And now you may have a situation where Kevin Huerter's playing point guard, so bigger lineups. And then on the Orlando side, if you don't have Cole Anthony, you could have Gary Harris playing point guard with bigger lineups there too. Maybe it's Tim Frazier, who is not going to push the ball up and down the court the way that Cole Anthony does. So I think totals at around 211 or 212 right now. It probably falls to 210 regardless. You take Anthony out, I think we could see this all the way down to like 207, maybe even a little bit lower. So that becomes my favorite total bet for the day, especially if Cole Anthony's not there tonight.
Last one here, dudes. We're going to stick on the DK Sportsbook, but just big picture. What is your favorite bet there tonight in the NBA, Matt?
So I want to mention this future bet before we get to the new year and all of the value is gone. But I've been harping on Lakers missing the playoffs for basically the entire season. It was plus 750 about a month ago. We were talking about it on the slate. Plus 450, I think, last night or 2 nights ago. It's plus 280. I still think this is a good number. I think more likely than not, the Lakers do not make the playoffs. I think they most likely will wind up in the play-in round as the 9 or the 10 seed. And then they have to win 2 games. And the fact that you're still getting plus money on this and significant plus money at nearly 3-1, like to me, it's just nuts. I think the Lakers were the favorite to win the Western Conference and obviously also the Pacific Division when the season started. And I just don't think the line's been able to adjust fast enough to a team that doesn't have Anthony Davis. At some point, LeBron is going to have some kind. I mean, he tweaked his ankle last night. Who knows if that causes him to miss time? It's just they have an uphill climb to stay healthy, and no one else on the Lakers is good besides those 2 players. If one of them ends up with a more serious injury, then I think that the season just kind of ends for them. So, yeah, this it's kind of just a PSA. Like this is the last time that you'll be able to get real value on the Lakers not making the playoffs.
All right, Fryer, bring us home, man, with your favorite bet of the night.
Well, I got to say, Matt sold me on that one. I really like that. It doesn't take much to sell me on the Lakers doing poorly, but still, I like that one. I like the Rockets-Bucks game. Of course, I talked about that earlier. That was my favorite one coming into the show. But then when we get the news about the Hawks, I really like the Magic as underdogs tonight. Even without Cole Anthony possibly in the situation where Gary Harris and like Kevin Huerter are the ones that are running the show, I like that situation a lot more for the Magic. So that one, them as underdogs winning money line, winning straight up has become my favorite pick now.
All right, guys, that is a show. Stay tuned, everybody, for Madden Sim starting over there on YouTube and Twitch. We got Giants and Titans. That's at high noon. Then The slate tonight, 5 o'clock, with yours truly, Jeff and Reed. We'll talk more football, and also, we're going to squeeze in some Tiger Woods chatter as well. So we'll see everyone back here tomorrow morning as well for the Sweat, 11 o'clock.